Oh my God, Becky, look at her butt.
Hi, and welcome to Stop Chasing Skinny. This radio program is all about how to live your best fit life and enjoy and not worry about dieting and just to make it a lifestyle choice and really enjoy everything that life has to offer. I'm Stephanie Keenan, and tonight my first guest is Megan Bryan. And we're going to be talking about some very important topics tonight. Celiac disease. Some of you may have heard about celiac disease. It's an intolerance or sensitivity to gluten. And a lot of you probably have heard of gluten-free products and trying to avoid gluten. And I read a statistic recently that said that 1/3 of the population, that's 33% of Americans, are trying to avoid gluten. But most of them don't even know why. So I wanted to bring Megan in so that she could talk about gluten, celiac disease, the importance, how to recognize it, who to ask for help, and really to share with everybody that your life isn't over if you've been diagnosed with celiac disease. A lot of people, they don't want to make a lifestyle change, and it's not nearly as difficult as you might think. So with that, I want to welcome Megan.
Hi. Thanks for having me, Stephanie.
Thanks for coming out. This is great.
Yeah.
So I really want to start from the beginning of how you found out that you had celiac disease.
Well, like you, I've always enjoyed being active and outdoors and lived a really healthy lifestyle. I was not, an unhealthy person. It wasn't, as if I had a really poor diet. I had some of the typical American diet, but was a fairly active, healthy human being. But I started getting really sick, and I was pretty young, too. I was in my 20s, and so it wasn't as if it was, I should be feeling that sick. And, it was unexplained symptoms that, again, for somebody in their 20s, you shouldn't really be feeling. It was things like aches, pains, joint pain, fatigue during the day, even though, I would be sleeping plenty. Things like I would get really bloated, or I would swell. I would have unexplained swelling, and I wasn't overweight. I just, my legs would swell up, or, so, it was all of this stuff that, really, I didn't really understand. Oh, and things like inflammation. I'd have skin issues going on. My nails were very brittle. So, but it got really bad when I, all of a sudden, for about a month, just simply could not, it was as if my digestive system shut down. I wasn't digesting food, I couldn't eat, everything stopped working. And I started developing symptoms of going septic. And so I went to a gastroenterologist. He was one of the most reputable in the town where I was living. And he'd been a gastroenterologist for years. So, he was a trusted doctor. And they did all the tests. It was very expensive, very invasive. And they, at the end of all of the tests, after all the money was spent, basically they told me I had nothing wrong with me. And that it was just, the blanket diagnosis, which is IBS, which just means you have pain in your stomach. And so it was really frustrating.
That's so interesting. And this is one of the main reasons that I wanted to have you as one of my first guests, because I am a fitness professional. People typically come to me to lose weight, right?
Yeah.
That is my number one request from clients. How can I lose weight?
Right.
I always get, the second question really is how to stay regular. And then they say, I'm sorry, this may be too much information, but that's their second question.
Yep.
And so when it's a question like that, and then there are a lot of these other symptoms that go along with it.
Yep.
They complain about being bloated, they're having skin issues,
Mm-hmm.
there's hormonal imbalances,
Yep.
And the lack of sleep. And it's challenging because from an outside perspective, I can see all of these different little pieces. And, I can see that these aren't normal.
Yes.
But I also see that them being in their situation, moms are my main clients, and as a mom, you are taxed on every level. Yeah, you are not sleeping because there is no time to sleep. It's very, very stressful. You're very stressed out. You're sleep deprived, and so I think a lot of people end up missing out on all of these signs where they are signs, and when you put them all together, like you just listed out, then you're like, oh man. So I get that a lot. I get a lot of my clients who come to me to lose weight, but for the most part, it's all this other inflammation going on in their body.
Absolutely.
Their digestive system is not regular, which makes them very uncomfortable all the time. And it's, and yes, they're right for coming to me because it is lifestyle based and they can make better choices. But I think, it's nice to be able to recognize these things yourself and be able to seek out some other doctors, because I've also had clients who have come to me, same thing. They were tested for everything and nothing showed up. I had one woman, 3.5 years of testing, this random 30 pounds came on. She was always bloated, always having trouble, and finally she ended up going to a holistic practitioner and figuring all of these things out. So we'll get to that point in just a minute, but I really wanted to figure out how you found out you had celiac disease, and now let's go ahead and explain a little bit more what celiac is, because like I said in my intro, a lot of people know that they want to have gluten-free, and but I don't think they really understand why, maybe, unless you've been diagnosed.
Well, what you were saying earlier about inflammation that you see in a lot of your clients, the inflammation will kind of take on your body is inflamed, and there's a reason why it's inflamed. And it'll look differently for different people. It's going to show up in either eczema or skin issues or joint pain or, all of these different things. But what essentially is going on when you have celiac is it's an autoimmune response. An autoimmune disease is where your body attacks itself in any form. Like lupus is an autoimmune disease. There are several different forms of it, but celiac is an autoimmune disease where your body treats gluten like a foreign invader, and it turns on itself, and it produces kind of an immune response to it. It's as if it's fighting off an attacker, like a virus or something like that. And so, but the problem is it ends up attacking itself. And so what happens with celiac disease is your body's attacking itself, and it kills the lining of your intestines, and it destroys the villi. And the villi are kind of what help digest and extract nutrients from the food you eat. So say, somebody like me who was pretty healthy, I was eating well, I played tennis, I was active, I walked and was outdoors a lot, but I was so sick.
And so you were malnourished.
I was
because
malnourished.
You were not absorbing those nutrients.
I was not absorbing.
That's interesting.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and I see that too, and a lot of that presents itself in a lot of people think that cravings are simply a lack of self-control, and it's really not. It's really your body saying, I'm craving some kind of nutrient, and I've put out a couple little charts where it says, if you're craving something salty, you're missing these nutrients, that kind of thing. But so that's another reason that understanding this disease is really important, because a lot of people just chalk it up to, it just must be my self-control. My self-control is messed up. No, maybe you are nutrient deficient because your body is not able to absorb it. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah, and so this is just such an important issue. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about signs and symptoms. So if you think that any of this sounds familiar to you or anybody you know, stick around. We're going to talk about signs and symptoms, things that you may not recognize, may not realize, way beyond just some of the surface level stuff.
Hello, I wish I was a little bit taller. I wish I was a baller. I wish I had a girl who looked good, I would call her. Wish I had a rabbit in a hat with a bat and a 6'4" baller. I wish I was like 6'9" so I could get with Leo. She could be
Welcome back. And so now we're going to go ahead and talk about some of the signs and symptoms that you can watch for, just in case you are experiencing any of this stuff. So Megan, let's go ahead and start with the ones that you think maybe that people would go ahead and recognize as possibly linked to something like this. And then let's go a little bit further in depth and talk about some of the things that we don't necessarily connect to maybe celiac disease. We think maybe it has something to do with something else. I know that there are a lot of things on here that people think are just kind of a fluke or just happen. For most of these things, there's a reason behind it. So let's start with the common ones first.
Sure. And I know so much of, what as we were talking about earlier with your business, what you're dealing with is you've got people coming to you for whatever reason that their bodies are in crisis. They're looking to you as a trainer and as a health coach and as a fitness professional. They're looking to you for answers and for sometimes it starts out as just how do I look better? But ultimately, they're not going to look better until they're feeling better inside. And so if they've got some of these symptoms going on that are caused by gluten wreaking havoc on their body, causing inflammation in their systems, causing them to, be sick in so many ways, then the outside is not going to get better.
Yeah, that whole standard of move more, eat less, which I think is a super simplified.
Yeah.
That does, I can't stand it, to tell you the truth,
Yeah.
because that really oversimplifies everything. We are a complex chemistry project inside.
That's a great way to put it. We're a walking science project, chemistry.
Yeah, there's checks and balances and all of that. So, so digestive problems, because like I said, people come to me with digestive problems all the time.
Yes, and so a big one, it can go in either direction, whether it's diarrhea or constipation. It can, go in one way or the other. So some people will exhibit some symptoms, some people will exhibit it in another way.
Okay.
A lot of women especially will have bloating, just unexplained bloating. They'll eat and then all of a sudden, everybody talks about, you have pizza and beer and you just feel bloated.
Okay, yeah.
Right. That's one thing.
Yeah.
It's another thing when every time after you eat a meal, for whatever reason, you're really feeling bloated or your legs are swelling or that's not normal.
Yeah. This is where I recommend doing a food log. And I don't mean I hate counting calories, so I don't mean that. I mean write down the time that you ate, what you ate and how much of it, and then how you were feeling.
That's a great point. Because it could be that something you were eating there in that meal triggered it, and maybe you ate a meal where you didn't have any triggers. And so that's one thing to really kind of look out for is how are you feeling after you eat? And those are going to be big signs. Another thing is going to be unexplained weight loss. So let's say you're just losing weight and you don't know why. You're not necessarily changing anything, but weight's just coming off. And some people would think, oh, great, yeah, I'd love that. But that can be a real sign of trouble
I'm
with
sure
your
you
body.
feel so weak too, right?
Yeah.
Because you're probably doing it because you're malnourished.
Yep. Your body's not absorbing the food.
Yeah. And
so it's just and another thing that happens with celiacs is sometimes your body is not absorbing fats.
Okay.
And your body needs the fats. That's what, decreases inflammation. It's as you teach so much.
It helps your brain, it helps your joints, it helps keep your skin looking young.
Yep.
It helps all of it. Yeah.
Which is why you see so many people who have celiacs. Those are the very problems that they have. They have brittle nails, they have brittle hair, their eyes might be a little pale looking, their skin is dry.
Okay.
And that's all because they're not getting the fats that they need,
And
even
that
if they're
would cause
eating
the
them.
joint pain possibly too.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's that's kind of one. Another thing that can happen is people can get dermatitis, eczema. These are skin rash problems. And then a lot of times what they'll do is they'll go to a dermatologist and they'll just the dermatologist will prescribe a cream to put on it, but there's no question ever asked about, hey, maybe what's going on under the hood that's causing you to have eczema, that's causing you to have dermatitis. Why is your body exhibiting these external signs of internal inflammation?
Interesting. Yeah, because you're right. The typical treatment for that is to put something on the outside.
Yep, just slap a cream on it,
Yeah.
and you might get some relief from it, but it might not be dealing with the underlying issue.
Yeah, it's totally masking it, which could
Yep.
be wreaking havoc on your digestive system still. So
Right.
sure, I don't have that rash anymore, but I'm not absorbing nutrients. That's not good.
Right. Another thing you'll see a lot of times is going to be hormonal imbalances, and very sadly, very frustratingly, miscarriages. There are women who deal with miscarriages. I think in men sometimes it might be a little more difficult to see because women, our bodies are so
They're so
sensitive on a monthly
Yeah.
basis. There's an external, externally you can see what's going on. Whereas with men, it might be a little more difficult to tell. Maybe they're just feeling fatigue. Maybe, they've got other things going on. But with women, if you're having, I think 1 in every 3 pregnancies ends in a miscarriage. Typically, is it.
Interesting.
However, if you're having miscarriage after miscarriage after miscarriage, and some, fertility issues, you might want, and if it's accompanied by other symptoms, you
Right.
might want to look into it
Yeah.
and see maybe it's something going on. A big one is if you have a child, if there's a child, a baby, and there's failure to thrive, they're not growing, they're not at the weight where they need to be, they're not, size charts, they're low. It could be that they're just a small kid.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, if you're seeing other issues,
Yeah.
there could be something going on in their body. They're not getting the nutrients they need.
Because celiac's really, if you look at it, it's very much tied to genetics too,
Yeah, right.
So do you know what the statistic on that is?
I don't, but it is tied to genetics. It does run in families.
It does run in families, yeah. First degree, second degree.
Since I've been diagnosed, 3 other people in my family have been diagnosed. I was the
Interesting.
first, and there are 3 other people who have celiac. So
Okay.
Mhm.
So if you think you're sensitive to it, really watch your children.
absolutely, yeah. So and it's going to be again, once we're adults and we're at our full size, you don't see it as
Yeah,
easily as you
it's
would
not
in
gonna
a child,
present
but
itself like that.
but with a child, and then lastly, you might start having things like tingling and numbness in your extremities. When it gets really, really bad, you can have seizures, and a lot of that I think is coming from malnourishment.
Oh,
and
absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, so
Wow.
these are some things to watch out for. Just your body is going to become more brittle feeling.
Okay.
If
yeah,
that makes
and
sense.
I've read too when it talks about low calcium, so that totally
Yes.
makes sense with
Mhm.
the lack of absorption. So
Yep.
just think about anything that's tied into calcium. So like you said, I mean, the tingling, low calcium,
Uh-huh.
seizures could be due to some changes in your nutrient levels, and also
Great
yeah,
point.
osteoporosis, things like that.
Yes, brittle
tied into-
bones.
Yep.
That's definitely a problem the older you get. But if you're young and your bones are more brittle, that's
Yeah, that's a really, really
That's a
bad
problem. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then we've talked about some of these signs and symptoms,
Mhm.
and I want to go on to talk about what happens if you don't make these changes, because
Yeah.
I see that too, where
Yep.
somebody wants to make a change in their life, or they want the outcome to change, but they don't want to change anything in the process of that. And some people may have listened to this list and said, okay, yeah, well, I get some bloating, and I'm not talking about like that pizza and beer you have once a month.
right.
But I get this bloating after
Uh-huh.
this thing, and I have to say I've actually heard this, but it's totally worth it. Okay, so it's not just that temporary uncomfortable feeling that you're having.
Mhm.
It could lead to a lot worse things, right?
That's the thing that is the the issue here. A lot of people, like you were saying earlier, may be exhibiting symptoms that are really causing problems in their lives, but they don't want to know. They're kind of just like you were saying, in the intro, that people don't really, they're scared to find out, because if they find out, they know their life's going to have to change. They know they're going to have to change. And so, but I think the thing to remember here is, it really can cause some long-term damage to your body, irreversible damage.
Yeah, like you were saying that, having that killing off the lining of your intestines, you're not going to absorb anything. I mean, how else do you
Right.
get your nutrients?
And it starts making, it starts doing permanent damage to vital parts of your body, to vital organs. The biggest thing that has been proved in the medical field, the Annals of Internal Medicine there was a study published in the August 6th issue of the Annals of Internal Medicine. It basically showed that patients with celiac disease had an annual lymphoma risk of about 68 out of 100,000 people. So the normal rate is 24 out of 100,000 people. So that's 3 times as high.
That's interesting.
So there is a much higher risk that has been proven between lymphoma and people with celiacs.
That's really interesting.
It is.
So it goes down to that inflammation, that chronic inflammation in your body.
It does, and it can cause cancer. It can cause, cancers of the colon as well. That's a little more rare, but the long-term risk of lymphoma is a really serious thing to watch. So, not taking it seriously and just saying, I don't want to know about it. It's worth it. I'll just get bloated. I'll just deal with the headaches. I'll deal with the frustrations of having it because I don't feel like going gluten-free. Well, the problem is that if you ignore the problem, you could be running into serious medical issues.
It compounds.
And it does get worse over time. It's not something that gets better over time. It's something that
you don't build a tolerance up to it. If anything,
No.
It's the worst. It's the opposite.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. So
Yeah.
we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Megan's going to go ahead and share a little more about her story as far as figuring out that she was gluten intolerant and that she had celiacs, and then which doctors to go see, because I hear this all the time. I got tested. They said I was fine. So we'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Stephanie Keenan with the Stop Chasing Skinny radio program. And tonight we have Megan Bryan. She's talking to us about celiac disease, gluten intolerances, and what happens if you ignore it, and how to recognize it. So right now we want to go ahead and talk about some different doctors that you might want to go see if you think maybe you have celiacs, and a little bit more about her story about how she was diagnosed, because it was not just this quick diagnosis. It was doctor visit after doctor's visit, and maybe even a surgery in there.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. Yeah. Yeah, it was, this happened about, I had the symptoms that had built up over time. It got to a crisis point, and I was saying earlier in the show that, I started going to a very reputable gastroenterologist who was doing all of the typical tests that you might have when you have celiac, or when you have, intestinal problems. They did all of those tests, very invasive, very exhausting. And at the end of it all, I was told I was fine, that I just had IBS, that there was nothing wrong with me. It was really discouraging.
So you just have to live with it.
Yeah. Or like it's in my head.
Oh.
Which, when and again, I'm a healthy person. It's not like I, was sitting around doing nothing and eating poorly. I was, I like health. I like being outdoors. I like being active, and I wanted to be active again. And so I was super frustrated that my body wasn't cooperating. So anyway, so once we kind of got through that, it was very frustrating. His recommendation was maybe we should remove your gallbladder and see if that helps.
Now, this is interesting because like I said, I am not a doctor, but I do know that the gallbladder has a whole lot to do with the digestion of fats too,
That's
right?
exactly
Which is
right.
so interesting,
yes.
Because fats are the hard part to digest whenever you have celiacs.
That's
right?
exactly
Okay.
right. And what ends up happening is when you remove the gallbladder, all of that strain, that job assignment, turns to your liver. And so your liver becomes taxed. Your liver has to then do all the work that your gallbladder was this, engine. When you'd eat a fatty meal, when I'd eat meat or a steak or, just something with
good fats,
even
right?
good
Avocado
fats.
or
yeah, that's what was doing the work to digest it. And so they did remove my gallbladder, and surprise, surprise, it didn't help.
That's actually, I hear this story a lot.
Do you really?
I do. I hear it
Yeah.
a lot where, and then they told me I had to have my gallbladder removed, and all it did was make it even harder to eat food.
That's exactly right. Because
Interesting.
then your liver is having to do that job, and the liver's, it needs a lot of support itself.
Well, and if you have so much inflammation going on in your body, then
Mm-hmm.
it inflames all of everything's inflamed.
Right. And so
Okay.
then you've just got a big old chemical nightmare going on at that point, where your body's really doing its best. It's saying, "Help me here. I'm trying." But, I kept feeding it the very thing that was causing it to be inflamed, which was gluten.
Gluten. It was not the fat. It was not the gallbladder.
No, it was gluten. My body was having an autoimmune response to the gluten that I was putting into it. It was becoming inflamed. It was producing inflammation, and it was attacking itself and destroying the lining of my intestines, which meant that I wasn't getting nutrients.
This is so interesting. I hope that this is clearing up maybe some questions for you and kind of pushing you in a direction that maybe if you're having these unanswered questions for yourself, or you have family and friends that have these unanswered questions, to start questioning this stuff, because this is I hear this all the time, and I heard it well before I was ever a fitness professional. I was an engineer before this, and I was a Navy nuclear engineer before that, and so I've been hearing this story over and over and over again for years. I didn't really know what I was listening to back then. I just knew that there was a pattern. It's really interesting to see it now, though, in the position that I'm in.
And people don't know why. But the typical American diet, what's contained in the American diet?
Lots of grains.
Lots of grains. Everything has gluten. Gluten is contained. You find gluten in, it's not just bread. There's wheat in everything. There's wheat in soy sauce. Soy doesn't have gluten.
So let's, just for a real quick second, because I do
Sure.
want to go into this whole list of the things that we may think of as having gluten,
Sure.
the things we may not think of as having gluten.
Mhm.
I want to go back to the doctor, though, because
Yes. Oh, yeah,
that
yeah.
I think is really important. That's where I really try to help my clients to refer them to the right kind of doctor that will take a look at some of these other things and give them a real diagnosis. Because if you just would have
Yeah.
given up at that point and you would have said, well, I guess, they did everything they could. They removed my gallbladder. They told me I'm fine. I had all the tests. There are a lot of people that just go on living like that because
Yeah.
that's what the doctor said. So what did you do next?
Well, it was interesting. I had a friend who recommended there was a doctor. She was an MD, but she had been trained in Chinese medicine. And so she was, I had gone to see her basically for hormonal issues. I had a hormonal imbalance, which is another thing that happens a lot with with when somebody does have celiacs, is their hormones get out of whack, and that leads into. So I was seeing her pretty.
So like menstrual cycles not being regular,
Yes.
and having really bad PMS and horrible
Yes.
cramps and
really bad
really-
periods.
okay.
Yes.
so like really, really heavy. Like
Yes.
Okay.
All of that
Yeah.
can show up with women, and it can show up with other, with other diseases as well, or other problems that are going on. But when you've got celiac and all the inflammation that accompanies it, then
Totally makes sense.
yes. And so I was seeing her for that and to kind of get a hormone check. However, once I got in there, this woman was taught to look holistically at a patient. She was an MD, so I know that she had her medical degree. She had been trained in Western medicine. However, she also took into account the whole body and the underlying issues that cause external manifestations of disease. So a lot of times with Western medicine, and this is a big debate, but a lot of times in Western medicine, it's a financially driven industry that puts a diagnosis on a symptom and treats a symptom. But a lot, just like we were talking about earlier in the show, somebody who has celiacs might have eczema.
Right.
Maybe exhibiting eczema, so they go to a dermatologist. The dermatologist gives them a cream. The eczema gets better. But there's no understanding of the whole person, that there's something going on under the surface that's causing that.
Yeah.
So this doctor, she looked at all of my symptoms and she said, "Have you ever been tested for celiacs?" Well, I hadn't even heard of celiacs at that point. This was 10 years ago. So She, she did the tests on me.
What is the test? Is it a blood test?
Well, there are several ways that they can do it.
Okay.
But for me, there was a blood test involved, and you have to. You can't be gluten-free at the time that they take the test.
Okay, that's good information.
Yes. So if you have eliminated all the gluten from your diet, the hard thing about getting diagnosed is you will have to put gluten into your diet to get tested.
Okay.
So a lot of people are hesitant to actually get the test. They just know that something's not right. But because you have to, and when they have gone gluten-free and they're used to their body not having it, the thought of putting it back in there is just miserable.
Is there a benefit to actually having that diagnosis in your medical record? I mean, is that...
That's a good question, and I don't know that one from a medical standpoint or from an insurance standpoint, too.
Okay, but from your own personal standpoint, you don't get treated any differently knowing that you have celiac. You just know you can't mess around with it, right?
That's right.
Okay.
And I demand that from the healthcare professionals that work with me.
Okay.
I'm very adamant when I deal with them that this is what I'm dealing with, and they work with me on that.
Well, and that makes sense because if you
yeah.
go in for anything else moving forward, they need to know that. And that makes sense.
Right. And so it definitely is. You if you have it, you want to know.
Okay. Yeah.
However,
I wouldn't want to not know.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of times once you hear about the symptoms, you're going to probably be wondering, but
I think there are probably a few listeners right now, and I have people that I'm going to specifically send this to because they've talked to me about some of the different symptoms, but
really?
I'm not an expert. I get a lot of information from a lot of different places, and I can kind of piece it together, and I am scientific in that way, but and I do pass articles to some of my clients or friends when they ask me about certain things, but I feel like this is a really good comprehensive talk about it and all of the downside too, because you have to know what happens if you just continue to ignore it.
Right.
So you got diagnosed.
Well, I got diagnosed, and I think to answer your question, I think finding a doctor who has either been trained, and a lot of times I think in medical school, I can't speak for MUSC. We're here in Charleston. I know that celiac and gluten intolerance has become more in the forefront, but finding a doctor that is going to look at the whole body and all of the systems and the way those systems work together. So maybe finding somebody who has been trained in Eastern medicine as well. Sometimes that is helpful, but then I think there are lots of great Western MDs too who
recognize that.
Really
but
do
if your
recognize
doctor
it.
doesn't know what celiac disease is, then you might want to find a new doctor.
Yeah, or if they tell you, oh, that's not really a thing, or that's not really a problem, or I would move along.
Exist. Yeah,
moving right along.
Second opinion, please.
Yeah, but that was, I think that's the big thing is, and before you go to, if you want to know for sure, go get tested before you eliminate gluten.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's take a really quick break, and then we're going to come back, and Megan's going to talk more about the foods that we know have gluten in there, that you all might think, oh yeah, well, bread, gluten, and some very uncommon things and how gluten hides in our stuff. And then, so that's what we're going to talk about. And then we're also going to talk about restaurants and how it can be kind of a minefield out there if you're not educated yourself, if the staff isn't educated. So we're going to talk about how really it's how your life is not over if you've been diagnosed with celiac disease.
Right.
So we'll be right back.
What y'all know about a supermodel? Fresh out of Air magazine. Buy her own bottles. Look, pimp juice, I keep it running. You will always be my
Welcome back. Again, this is Stephanie Keenan, and this is the Stop Chasing Skinny radio show. And tonight we have Megan Bryan, who is talking about celiac disease. So we want to talk about some of the foods that you may think of as having gluten. It's kind of common sense for somebody who has even heard of gluten. For some people who have heard of gluten and are trying to avoid it because they think maybe they have some inflammation going on, where those gluten gluten might be hiding.
Right.
Sneaky gluten. Okay, so let's go ahead and start talking about maybe the ones where we think of it as common, like
Okay.
bread.
Yeah. I mean, obviously bread, pancakes, biscuits, things like that are just made in with traditional wheat flour.
Wheat flour. So it comes from wheat
flour.
right?
It
so
does.
Gluten is a protein in wheat.
Yes, and unfortunately for all the beer lovers out there, including myself, it is in barley, and so most beers, unless it's a sorghum beer, it contains a lot of gluten.
Okay,
and
so we have wheat, barley, and rye, I think?
Rye definitely has gluten. So most, a lot of these, traditional, flours, even spelt, semolina flour, which is used to make a lot of Italian pastas.
Okay.
All of that does contain gluten.
Okay, so we're talking about some bread, some pasta, some beer, tortillas.
Yeah, the flour tortillas.
Okay, so those
Yeah.
are some cakes.
Cakes.
Pastries.
It's really everywhere, and especially in the American diet. It's everywhere. Just about unless you are specifically going to a health food store or someplace that has specifically gluten-free products. It's in just about everything, and a lot of sauces and a lot of
which
thickeners.
sauces?
You
Sauces
know,
and thickeners.
yeah, it's a thick. Flour is usually used as a thickener for Alfredo sauce. If you're making a roux, in traditional like New Orleans cooking, which I love, jambalaya. The roux is used with flour and butter, and so that's a thickener. So it may not look like bread per se, but there's gluten all through there. And then it's in all kinds of sneaky places, Stephanie. It's for an American, it is tough. There will be a big one is barley malt. Barley malt is used in all kinds of products. Case in point, I had a juice one morning. I was at a friend's house spending the night. She offered me a juice the next morning, and I thought, oh great, I'd love to have a healthy juice in the morning. Take a sip and look, and it has barley malt in it. And I just realized I'm going to have a rough few days.
Oh, it's going to be a rough one, yeah.
Yep. And you're
man,
thinking
that's so
healthy, Whole Foods juice.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
so healthy does not necessarily mean anything.
No,
I threw
no.
that word out a long time ago.
Absolutely.
I mean, I use it because that's what we pick up on, but it means different things to different people.
It really does. The other thing that's huge is soy sauce. Soy does not contain gluten. Soy is not a problem. However, traditional soy sauce, not there are gluten-free soy sauces. Tamari, for example. Tamari is gluten-free, but traditional soy sauce is loaded with wheat.
Okay.
And so, if you go out for sushi, most things contain gluten.
Interesting. That's really interesting. So, yeah, if you get diagnosed, your life isn't over. You just have to know what to look for.
That's the thing.
Yeah, just to educate yourself.
Yes.
Now, something else that we have experienced together, Megan and I, we're good friends, and we hang out a lot.
We do.
We do fun stuff. You should really check out our social media channels. Just Google Stephanie Keenan. I'm on every social media channel. And we post lots of fun pictures.
We're both really active.
We are really active. We do surf lessons and stand-up paddleboard and all kinds of fun stuff. Running around Charleston. It's funny because I think a lot of people watch our feeds, and then like when they come visit, they use us as like the tour guide.
Right.
Oh, well, we saw Stephanie and Megan here. So, and I get questions all the time. Which stand-up paddleboard company is the best? So that's really fun. But we went out to dinner one night, and all of us ordered burgers. We had 5 burgers, and Megan was very, very specific. I am celiacs. I cannot have any buns. I can't have anything touch my food. They need to change gloves. I need to have it cooked on a separate grill. And her side was separate. So she made sure that they could do it in the kitchen, that the waitress understood the requirements. And then when all everything got to our table, there was a little confusion, like, oh, which one's mine? Like, they didn't come out with it and go, this is the gluten-free celiacs meal. And Megan was a little hesitant, but she went ahead and ate it like a trooper, and she was sick all week. I'm pretty sure they put a bun on everything, and they went, oh, nuts. That one wasn't supposed to have a bun. Well, just that touching of it. So if you're listening and you work in a restaurant, it's really important. Megan isn't just some dieter that's like, oh, I heard gluten wasn't good. You know, and sure, just a dieter heard gluten wasn't good. Sorry, not judging. But really, it will put her in the hurt locker for a really long time. She was suffering all week long.
It was painful. Oh, I had to work.
Yeah.
And it was a tough week. And typically when I go to a restaurant, I really try to be respectful of the staff and respectful of the kitchen, and I'll always tell them, hey guys, if you can't do it, let me know, and I'm totally fine with not eating.
I love your line too. I would rather not react.
Right. If you can't do it, I got it. That's fine. I don't want to stress you guys out if you're not equipped for that. Just let me know, and I'd rather not eat.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, one of the issues that is huge is cross-contamination on foods that contain gluten. So you can have something, I cannot tell you how many times in Charleston I have ordered off a gluten-free menu, where the restaurant will bring me out the gluten-free menu and say, this is what we can do, and then I'll talk to the staff and I'll say, hey, I'm not one of these picky dieters who wants to just, you know, fit into
not
skinny
giving it a
jeans.
whirl.
Right. This is a serious deal for me. Are you guys equipped for that? And a lot of times, usually they'll say yes. Sometimes I'll get an honest server who'll say, you know, we really aren't. And that I so appreciate that from servers when they'll be honest with me and just say, you know, we really, there's just flour floating around in there. You're going to get gluten. Yeah. I really super appreciate that. And a lot of times I'll tip the server, even if I'm not eating the food.
Even when I couldn't eat dinner.
I'll still tip them for bringing me water.
Yeah.
You know, just because I really appreciate that care and them taking the time. But the point here is that even if it does not contain flour, it doesn't have croutons on the salad, you know, it's just grilled chicken. Say that grilled chicken is on the same grill as, you know, something that was marinated in soy sauce just before it. Well, guess what? That soy sauce is on my chicken. It's in my gut, and I'm sick as a dog. Or, you know, another typical example is, let's say the server, this is something that's happened to me before. I was at, you know, those burrito restaurants where you walk up to the, and, you know, you get the burrito, and I said, hey guys, can you make me a gluten-free, I need you to change gloves if that's okay. And they were great about it. And I watched the guy change gloves, and he wasn't, you know, just out of habit, he wasn't thinking, and he put his hand on a flour tortilla. And I'm watching it, and I just, you know, I'm trying not to be that person, you know. I really am not.
You have to be. It's your health.
It's my body. Yeah. And I had to say, hey, you just touched a flour tortilla. Can you please change gloves again? You know. And
he probably didn't mind. He probably just didn't know, right?
No, and he was sweet as could be about it. And and people don't realize, and you know, unless they've got a family member or a friend that they see suffering with it, they don't understand what a big deal it is. Yeah. Because you know, again, a lot of, I think, you know, what you hear in restaurants is, you know, I've even seen a Facebook post going around about things that restaurant people are frustrated about, and one of the things says, no, I can't make your food gluten-free.
Ah, that's interesting.
You know,
so that's about education. And then, that's really, that's a poor attitude.
And it is frustrating because it is a little bit more work. And I know that restaurant staff they're already so taxed. They're already having to take people's pictures and do 18 different things, right? And, you know, things that they didn't have to do 10 years ago.
That's true.
However, this is a big enough deal that, you know, once you've got a family member or a son or daughter or a parent or somebody who's got celiacs, they'll realize, no, I really do need to take the time.
Yeah, I do care about this. So that brings me to my next point. I really want to ask you about what you are doing to educate restaurants in the Low Country area right now on the importance and how to keep from cross-contaminating food.
Yeah, no, I've just started a blog. It's called saltwaterchef.com, and it's a blog that's all about gluten-free, clean, healthy living. Beautiful food, good food, satisfying food that doesn't have gluten in it. And I'm going to be working with restaurants around the Low Country, having them showcase their favorite foods, a lot of traditional Southern meals, traditional Low Country meals.
Reed fried chicken.
Exactly. So that maybe you don't have to eliminate fried chicken from, if you love fried chicken and you can't imagine doing without that.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to know you have celiacs. Maybe, interviewing a restaurant who can create some gluten-free fried chicken.
Yeah.
One thing.
They've done it for paleo, right? So
They have, and paleo, all paleo food is gluten free, but not all gluten free food is paleo.
Right.
But really kind of trying to show that gluten free is there's a fun life ahead of you still with food, even if you get diagnosed. It's not some sort of end of my food life sentence. So there are going to be times when you're out at a restaurant and you can't order because maybe the staff hasn't caught up to what's going on in the US. However, I think the more people are learning about it, the more restaurants you're going to be able to go to and order a great gluten-free meal.
It's not really that hard. I mean, once like some of the practices have been changed.
Yes.
It's not all that difficult to implement that. I mean, really.
Well, and one of the things that the NASFT, that's the National Association for the Specialty Food Trade, they basically talked about that between 2011 and 2013, the gluten-free market grew. It completely tripled.
Yeah.
So I think it's around 44%. There was a 44% growth. I have that statistic.
Yeah, I used to, but I don't anymore.
Well,
it was huge though. It was huge,
and it's become
a need for it.
It's an over $15 billion industry just in food, and $2 billion industry in drink.
Interesting.
And so, for beer companies out there, the sorghum beers that are gluten free, it's a little tougher to do. But the vodkas, the different drinks that are out there, and even the non-alcoholic drinks. Like I was telling you, there was the juice that I had with the barley malt in it. So, but understanding that this is here and it's here to stay, and you got to get on board with this because there's a huge financial market out there for the gluten-free industry.
Yeah, there absolutely is.
There
is.
And so it's not just about, hey, have a good heart for the poor celiac person over there. There's serious money.
Yeah.
In the gluten-free industry.
Yeah.
And people are becoming more and more educated. They're more and more savvy about what that means.
Yeah. I do have to say, though, from a wellness coach's perspective, gluten-free doesn't mean you can just eat the whole box. Just saying.
That's a great point. And gluten-free does not mean you just have to go to the aisle at Whole Foods and buy the $6 cookies either. The $6 cookies can be great, but there's a whole world of food out there that you can make. You can make it at home. One of the things we're going to be doing at Saltwater Chef is teaching people how to bake at home, how to just replace the wheat flour, replace it with rice flour, tapioca starch, potato starch, maybe put a little xanthan gum in there, but make your own gluten-free flour mix and make your own foods.
And by foods, she means every Sunday morning she makes donuts that are gluten-free.
I do. Baked,
and they're
yummy
fun,
donuts.
And they're pretty.
And they have chocolate in them.
Yum. Yum. Yeah. So she's going to be sharing all of those recipes on her blog, too. I want to go ahead and wrap this up. We've been on here for, about an hour or so.
Yes.
I hope you all have enjoyed it, and it's been educational. I like to put out some entertaining stuff, but also some actionable information that you can take and you can implement. So even if you don't think, you don't have any symptoms, it's great to understand this and be able to help those that you love and that you care for. If you're an employer, it's great to even recognize this stuff and maybe even suggest that your employees get things checked out. I mean, because I know that, it's hard to work. It's hard to live.
It is.
And I don't know. I talk about health all the time. So overstepping boundaries, I don't think so. If somebody's telling me all these symptoms, I will tell them, maybe you want to get this checked out. So our last thing that we want to talk about is one other thing that Megan does if she can't have a gluten-free meal, it's a meal replacement shake that she carries so that she knows, because it's been stamped gluten-free, she knows that unless some gluten gets in the water, then she's safe having that, and she doesn't have to just go completely hungry. So I'll have her talk about that for just a second, and what makes it more important to be a whole meal replacement. It's not just some protein shake.
Right. And on the Saltwater Chef blog, we talk about the foods, but a lot of times you're in a place where you can't prepare a meal. You're out and there's a restaurant that can't make you a gluten-free meal, and you're stuck and you're starving. I use Isagenix meal replacement shakes. They have a lot of protein, there's good fat in there, there's carbohydrates, and it's easily absorbable nutrients. One of the big things with celiacs is your body is nutrient deficient. A lot of times it shows up as anemia, you're short an iron, but you've got to have quickly absorbed nutrition available. So I use my daily staple is the Isagenix nutrition system. I use a lot of adaptogens and things that help calm the inflammation in my body when it does arise, that help calm. There are a lot of adaptogens in Isagenix.
Your body is super sensitive now to all
Very
the inflammation
sensitive
stuff. So
yes,
just like something that would take me a lot more to inflame. So like stress affects you a lot more
too,
huh?
Stress does.
Okay.
Yeah, and it'll show up immediately on my skin, or it'll show up immediately on my sleep, or something will happen very, very quick because my body is very, very sensitive.
Yeah.
And the Isagenix really helps kind of calm all of my systems.
Yeah.
And it helps, any extra weight that I might carry, it releases it right away.
Yeah.
To
help remove the toxins.
All of my systems are really kind of calmed down, but then, I don't have to go around hungry. I know that I've got a gluten-free meal right there that I can have when I need it.
Yeah, I don't know. I was in the Navy and I moved overseas and I've done lots of stuff, but you want to talk about some anxiety. Me with no food causes anxiety. So I couldn't imagine if I didn't have any options.
Oh, me too.
So that's, I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, and you can visit saltwaterchef.com, or you can visit saltwaterchef.isagenix.com to see some of the products that I use as well.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thanks. And we're going to put that in the show notes so that you can link onto that as well. Follow us on all of our social media channels too: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr. Really, if you just Google either one of our names, you can find us out there. We post some pretty funny stuff. Cosmo is my 80-pound English yellow lab, and he's kind of my
your mascot.
He's my little mascot, and he goes paddling with us, and he drinks the Isagenix shakes. I only give him half, and it's vanilla, it's not chocolate. So he does that, but we really like to just put actionable, usable information out there. Some of it's entertainment, because like my tagline says, life begins when you stop chasing skinny. It's not just about being skinny. It's about living a really fit and full and fun life. That's our goal here. And Megan really helped us understand how if you have celiac disease, you have this inflammation in your body, it's really hard to live a life like that. And you don't have to live like that. Just because a doctor told you, oh, no, that's it. I would say keep digging, keep asking, experiment with yourself. I see that all the time. Self-experimentation is amazing. Doctors are really, really smart, but they're also really short on time. And sometimes it's just hard for them to keep up on everything. So your body best. Your doctor isn't with you 24/7. So really take the initiative to figure yourself out. Take all that stuff with you and keep asking until you get some answers. So thanks so much for joining us. You can also check me out on www.skfitlife.com. And we will see you next week.